in the fight against malnutrition. Jin, I do. Over to you.
Well, thank you very much, and it's a great pleasure to be here with you all. I spent the past weekend as a member of the Mo Ibrahim Foundation board meeting with over 400 youth leaders discussing Africa's potential. And I think it's quite interesting to think of the backdrop of how the demographic profile of Africa is going to change in the next 30 to 40 years. You know, currently we sit at over 1.2 billion people, of which half are under 20 years old. By 2035, the African workforce will be larger than that of China's. And by 2050, a quarter of the global workforce will be African. So what are the implications of this demographic dividend that we are going to see, which will be substantially younger than many of the populations of the world? And our population by then would have reached 2 billion. And we have to think today of what we are going to do. Where are we going to create the jobs? What are the skills people need? What are the livelihoods? And how should this economy integrate and create the prosperity, not just for the world, but for Africa in particular? And I think that's a critical challenge. And I come back to the point that Margrasa Michel has raised. Who is the elephant in the room? It is our government. And doing the right thing means that they have to integrate the way they work across government to make sure that the supply side measures that are in place promote agriculture. And how should we do that? We have to tackle the issue of the rights of women, because 80% of the food production in Africa is done by women, largely subsistence farmers, who are usually at the bottom of the pyramid and substantively malnourished. And their families and their children constitute the bulk of the 60 million children that are stunted in Africa. What do they need is our question we should ask. And if we know of all the empirical evidence that we increase the rights, the leadership, and the incomes of women, there's an 80% chance that the education, health, and nutrition of the children improves. So I think we've got to look very substantively at scale. There is a massive grab of land taking place across Africa, which is displacing communities, which is destroying biodiversity, and is, in a sense, leading to increased household food insecurity. How do we change the model of agriculture in Africa so that it addresses the food insecurity at a household level, creates livelihoods and jobs, connects farmers to markets, and then creates the access to the global markets? That's our challenge.
What's the interface between developing systems that provide a lot of food, but also developing systems that provide household-level jobs, employment, work for individual people?
I think the model really has to be based on small-scale farms. And ultimately, it's the aggregating of those small-scale farmers that achieves the bargaining power that they need. And it's a form of cooperatives that I've seen in India, highly successful at organizing thousands of small-scale farmers, but with great efficiency and with the most competitive business practices and business tools that improve productivity. But that aggregation model and the transfer of skills and the way we connect those farmers to the market will be key. And the people in the marketplace are typically the companies we work with, the Nestle's of this world, the Walmarts of this world, the giant retail chains, which should become part, this model should become part of the supply chain and the value chain of the companies that are already established in the market, that ultimately create for me a movement of entrepreneurs. I own my piece of land. What I put into the land is what I will take out. But I will give you the skills. The government is there to provide land, water, seed, power, irrigation. It should do that on a sustainable basis, and I promise you, I've seen models that within 3 to 5 years are entirely sustainable on their own.
Africa's population exploding. That's what focused our minds on this issue originally at The Economist. How do you feed 9 billion people in 2050? And you look at the demographic chart of population projections for a country like Nigeria between now and 2100. It's amazing, amazing, mind-boggling. But is it a self-fulfilling prophecy that the population has to go like that? Should governments not be focusing more? Would it be desirable for them to focus more on how we limit Africa's population increase?
I hate the term population explosion because it doesn't really exist. If you look at the average size of families across the spectrum, whether they happen to be Christian countries or where a majority of people are Muslim or whether they're rich or poor, the average size has changed dramatically. So if you really go into demographic statistics, the population will naturally grow to 9 billion, and we can sustain a population of 9 to 10 billion in the world. It means we have to change how we conduct ourselves, how we work. And that means, the natural consequence of improving standards of living, improving education, improving the awareness of people around issues of nutrition, will naturally lead to limitations in sizes of families. But my experience across the world is that it's a really misplaced notion to say that population explosion is a driver of malnutrition or hunger.